Hi there! Welcome to Cook Local, Eat Local, the podcast where you can find inspiration, tips, and recipes for enjoying more local food and drink. I am David Crowley, your host. In today's episode, we'll be talking to Elizabeth Almeida, owner and farmer at Fat Moon Farm Mushrooms. Really looking forward to this conversation. I've been a fan of this local mushroom farm for a couple years now, and we will dig into learning about their business and more about wonderful mushrooms. Hello, Elizabeth. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, David. Great to be here.
All right, I've been looking forward to this conversation because we were talking a little bit before we hit record, and I have, for a couple of years now, become a fan of your mushrooms. They come to me through my family dinner local food share, and so I've always been a little curious. And you also have some great fun content on your social media feed on Instagram that I see from time to time. So I'm really looking forward to learning more.
I always look forward to seeing what you're cooking with our mushrooms, David. When we drop off at family dinner, I know there will be something on tasty on Instagram to see in a couple days.
Definitely. All right. Well, before we get deep into all the details of mushrooms, and I'm sure we're going to get into a lot of fun mushroom facts, but first thing I want to start with is just to learn a little bit more about the inspiration for starting your business. Well, I don't want to say maybe when you were a kid in kindergarten or something said someday I want to be a mushroom farmer, but I'm guessing there might be a different story. And if so, give us at least the version.
Sure. Well,
That's
I tell people never in a million years would I have guessed I'd grow up to be a mushroom farmer. Never mind that I didn't really like mushrooms as a kid.
Oh, fun fact.
Yeah, fun little twist there. But when you grow up on the white button mushrooms, you can
Mm-hmm.
understand why they're not so exciting. Although I did grow up in the Midwest on a farm where we did forage for morels. So that is definitely the
Ooh.
foraging piece is definitely part of my heritage. And my dad forages, my grandfather foraged up until his final year of life in his 90s.
Mm.
So that's definitely a fun family tradition. So when we moved to Massachusetts, my husband and I knew I wanted to do something in local food and education and, with the community. So for a few years, I ran a small vegetable CSA. And land, as folks probably know, is cost prohibitive for agriculture in Massachusetts, or
Sure.
just very, very challenging. And so after a few years, I realized I needed to pivot and I still wanted to be in the local food system. And I was doing an exercise in creativity and thought, how can I do that when I live on an acre of woods in the suburbs?
Yeah.
And, mushrooms. And at that time, nobody
Hmm.
else in the area was growing too many mushrooms. And so I'm pretty much self-taught from Google and YouTube and other mushroom
Wow.
farmers who have generously shared knowledge. And I've managed to grow the business to the point that we're supplying probably 30 to 50 different restaurants and retailers every week, all in
Wow.
Eastern Massachusetts. And we have one full-time and three part-time employees right now who help with all the harvesting and growing and cultivation and delivery and all the tasks that go into running a mushroom farm.
I bet they're all of you are pretty busy. I bet that's a lot of restaurants to cover as well as and retailers. Excellent.
Yeah, it's fun though. I really enjoy the relationships with the chefs and with folks who care about local agriculture, folks like
Mhm.
yourself who have been supporting local farmers for years and want to see a strong local food economy. So I really enjoy being part of that space.
Yeah, that's great. And yeah, it does seem like a collaborative environment like we were talking about with family dinner and
Right.
maybe other partners that you have. There's a real passion for local food and the both because it tastes great, but the values inherent in it. So when you meet fellow travelers
Right.
who are into it, it's fun. I want to go back to that comment about not liking mushrooms as a kid. I wonder how common that is because I didn't like them either, and I was trying to think like when I started warming up to them. When did you start liking mushrooms, and did you find a lot of people with similar stories?
So part of the irony of my story is that so I didn't care for mushrooms, but my son, who was only 5 at the time, loved mushrooms. And this
Oh,
whole
okay.
thing came about because every time we go to the grocery store, he would go to the mushroom section and pick the biggest box of mushrooms.
That's
And
funny.
And so I would buy them. Like I thought, well, if he wants them, I'm not opposed to cooking them. And I would leave them big in the dishes so I could make sure they all ended up on his plate. And then after about a year or two of this, I bought him one of those little grow kits. And
Mm-hmm.
we grew a pound of oyster mushrooms in the
Okay.
bathroom, like on the bathroom sink. And after that, I was, ready for this transition, and I started breaking it open and looking up on the internet, like what's in here? How do you do
Huh.
this?
Yeah.
And, as I looked around, there were people growing meat, there were people growing vegetables, people growing fruit, but nobody was really, mastering that space with the
Yep.
mushrooms. And, but I like to say, in terms of coming around to eating them, once you have a good mushroom prepared by a good chef, that's a
Yep.
whole different experience than,
Right.
the white button mushrooms of my childhood. So, I've learned that, if you grill them until they're crispy, like I don't like the rubbery texture of mushrooms.
Oh, okay.
So
Yep.
I've learned cooking techniques and preparation techniques that give a better texture or one that
Mm-hmm.
I can enjoy. Um,
Yep.
so yeah, like things like roasting, and we may talk about more cooking in a little bit, but things like roasting and grilling where you can get more of that browning and crispy edges and then
Mm-hmm.
add a sauce, some kind of
Yeah.
flavorful sauce to that. That's how I've come to enjoy them.
Yeah, that sounds tasty. Yeah, I feel like mushrooms, there's several vegetables I didn't like as a kid, and I think it's no offense to my mother, classic like, 1970s, 80s Irish American cuisine,
Right, boiled, right? Everything
didn't do the
boiled with some
greatest
salt
with
and pepper.
vegetables. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
So
all right,
the
great.
other question you had asked me before was about the name of the business,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
came from my son when
Oh,
we were
okay.
starting the business. When he was really little, my husband and son would go out and look up at the moon and call it the fat moon. And when
Yep.
we were starting the business, I wanted something with the name moon in it because it's so iconic in agriculture. But,
Yeah.
full moon or harvest moon felt too ordinary. And
Right.
fat moon has been a great name for the business.
Yeah.
It's a little lighthearted, a little fun, which we try to have some fun, if you're a mushroom farmer,
Yeah.
a
That,
little quirky. Um, so the name has been a good fit for the business over the
yeah,
years.
that's a fun backstory. I don't think I had seen that before. So that I've seen that in your content. So that's interesting. I
Yeah.
was curious. Great. And I understand. So you've been at it for a while for a small business. We know it's not easy
Right.
sustaining. And I believe you started at least a few years before COVID hit. So I'm curious. A lot of food businesses didn't make it through that, unfortunately. But on the other hand, I think it was a time people started getting interested, valuing even more local food systems. So, how did that period of time play out for your business?
Sure. So I tell people the first weekend of COVID, when all the announcements came to, close the restaurants and schools were closed, that all my restaurants, at that point, I was about 85% restaurant customers and
Yep.
15% retailers. And like, my first reaction was I just wanted to crawl in bed and pull the covers over my head and stay there until this was all over.
Yeah.
Because I pretty, like that weekend, all my chefs called and canceled their orders. And I thought, what am
Right.
I going to do with you know, all these mushrooms and payroll and, more supplies already on order.
Yeah.
And within what, 2 or 3 days, we were seeing pictures of grocery store shelves that had no food on them.
Right.
And then it became a matter of, well, I can produce food, and what we need right now is food, right? And
Yeah.
so if we can rethink how we get food to people,
Hmm.
people still need to eat. So
Right.
what happened was the local so many people in the community turned to shopping locally, either because they wanted to for values reasons and support the local farmers and local economy, or they were afraid to go into the big grocery stores,
Right.
for health reasons. So because it was March, our local farm stands had very little product on the shelves. They were at the end. Even the best winter storage farms
Yeah.
were still at the end of their winter supply. So when customers went into the farm stands, there was very little to buy. And
Hmm.
so overnight, all these farms were asking for fresh mushrooms.
Yeah.
I did a little panic buy that week because I didn't know about packaging supply chain.
Right.
So I
Oh,
went to my supplier and completely filled up my minivan
that's funny.
and bought like what I thought was a 2-year supply of packaging. And basically, we pivoted and
Hmm.
started packing everything in small retail packs, kind of like
Yep.
this one that folks may see on the grocery store shelves around here, and worked with all our farm stands to give them one more product that they could have available for their customers.
That's
And
great.
then over time, the restaurants have come back, not quite as strong as before. And you know what? It's still a real struggle for the restaurants between
Yeah.
prices, labor. Um, it is, the restaurants are not out of the woods, even if they have survived through COVID to this point.
Right.
Many of them had multi-year leases, so you're still seeing restaurant closures, as these businesses hit the end of a 5 or 10 year lease. Um, so we work with a lot of farms. So we've kind of diversified where we have CSA
Yep.
farms that support us. We have retailers, independent retailers, and then we have restaurants. And we do have two distributors that help us get mushrooms out to the restaurant customers.
Oh, that's
Um,
great. I was going to say, when you talked about your small but mighty team, I was just thinking about
yeah,
the math involved with that number of restaurants. So yeah, you have a
Yeah, we
yeah.
do have a delivery van on the road 4 days a week. So we did
Yeah.
a Biz Empower small business grant through the state of Massachusetts last year,
Oh,
and we
good.
were able to crowdfund and then receive a grant for the balance of the cost of a delivery van. So
Oh,
we have
great.
a gorgeous Fat Moon delivery van that people might see out on, 95 and Route 2
Nice.
delivering mushrooms.
That's great. Well, I'm curious to learn a little bit more about the operation, the farm. We told me a little bit before we hit record. It sounds like it's a little different than what my people might picture in a typical New England small farm. Do you want to paint the picture? What would it look like if we got where you're recording? For those of you who are just doing the audio here, Elizabeth is not at the farm. She's in her home. So we're gonna ask it. Maybe paint a picture. What would we see if we
Sure.
drove by Fat Moon Farm?
So the farm is located in an old mill building in
Yep.
an industrial area. When you pull up, you would have no idea that there's a farm, except that we have a lot of HVAC equipment hanging out the windows. So mushrooms need constant fresh air exchanges. They need
Okay.
um, high humidity, 85 to 90% humidity, and ideally temperatures, a narrow range of temperatures, which for us right now is between 55 and 62 degrees.
Okay.
So you enter this old, decrepit mill building, and we have grow rooms built inside, and these grow rooms are each 8 feet by 24 feet. We have four of them. We have grow lights, so the lights are on 16 hours a day.
Mm.
And we have fans that kick on every 10 minutes or so to evacuate the air, and
Huh.
then foggers running in these rooms to replenish the humidity when the fresh air comes in.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
so the people often think of mushroom farms as being dark and in caves, and
Hmm.
it's true that agaricus, Bisporus agaricus mushrooms, the white button mushrooms and creminis and portobellas,
Yeah.
those grow in the dark on composted animal manure.
Hmm.
The mushrooms we grow, all the species we grow on cellulose in the light. So
Oh.
many of the species we grow you can find in the woods in New England, such
Hmm.
as oyster mushrooms, lion's
Yep.
mane mushrooms, bear's head, comb's tooth. These are all native to New England.
Yep.
And you can
Hmm.
imagine the environment in the woods. Like we're
Yep.
trying to create that in our space where it's, lit. We have lighting, but not too much lighting, and gentle air movement and high humidity. And then
Yep.
we can grow beautiful mushrooms year round.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's one thing that's pretty cool. I think businesses like yours, and I've come across others that are able to produce that local food product year round. So that I gather that lighting, the length of lighting, is probably trying to simulate like a summer kind of gross
Yeah, I mean,
growth
we're trying
seasons.
to simulate fall, like spring or fall,
Hmm.
and keep that going year round. So part of why I enjoy this business is some days I get to be a mechanical engineer and I'm, working on HVAC systems and
Yeah.
trying to fine tune that, whereas other days I'm more of a biologist and working on, coaxing the mushrooms to grow bigger and faster and more beautiful. And
Yeah.
then the third part of the job is talking to people and
Hmm.
talking to chefs and
Yeah.
getting to see the finished product. So
Nice.
as an entrepreneur, it kind of fills several buckets for me,
Yeah,
and
it
it's
sounds like it sure
different
would.
every day.
So you mentioned a range of the mushrooms that you grow. I don't know, do you have any favorites? And I know at some point you might even have one to show us for those of you who are watching on YouTube or other social platforms.
Well, I brought a few samples with me for flavor. I tell people the shiitake mushrooms we grow, which I know you've had, David,
Yeah.
these,
Oh
the
yeah,
little
love those.
brown cap and stem mushrooms that people are
Yep.
familiar with. Those I think have the most flavor per bite
Yeah,
of
I
what we
would.
grow.
Yep. Yep.
Um, but my favorite flavor mushroom is the maitake mushroom.
Oh, okay.
It's also known as hen of the woods, which also is native here to New England. I
Yep.
don't have one in front of me,
That's
but I like to roast that at a high temperature in a cast iron skillet, and they get kind of
uh,
like crisp, like chips, or you can,
yeah.
when you slice them, the visual is really interesting. And so you can slice them and then fry them until they're crispy, and you get, like a gorgeous garnish on top of another dish. But
Yeah.
I would have to say, like what I consider one of the workhorses on our farm is the oyster mushroom, which those of you who can see the screen, we have these gorgeous 2 to 3 pound oyster mushrooms that are incredibly versatile for cooking. And really they're one of the most common mushrooms that we grow too. So one that perhaps the listeners are familiar with.
Mhm. They're striking to look at too. So maybe we're going to post some photos from Elizabeth on our show notes page. So maybe we'll have to we'll put photos there for the items that for the folks that are just
Yeah.
listening. Okay.
They're so pretty. I mean, you can get these in the store, but to see the whole cluster,
Yeah.
all at once is
Yeah.
completely different than when you get a little pinch of it in
Yeah.
a package at the store.
Yeah. Just going back to the growing process. So what you said there, so they're not actually growing in dirt. It's what is it there, the material
They
they're
grow
growing
on
in?
sawdust. So
Okay.
this
Wow.
block here, you can see it's a 10
Oh, okay.
pound block of wet sawdust.
Wow,
And the
okay.
process
Yeah.
is that
Interesting.
you hydrate the sawdust and
Yep.
then pasteurize it. After it's been pasteurized, you add some mycelium or spawn from
Hmm.
another mushroom. So that's how we reproduce the mushrooms, is basically
Okay.
taking some roots from another mushroom, from an existing mushroom, and
Hmm.
putting that into fresh sawdust,
Yep.
tumbling it, and then you let it incubate for about a week or two, depending on the mushroom. And that mycelium then consumes the new sawdust. Once
Ah,
it's
okay.
consumed the new sawdust, you cut a hole in the bag and
Yep.
put it into the grow room. And that by cutting a hole in the bag, you're introducing fresh air and changing the humidity, and that's
Yep.
usually enough to trigger it to start growing.
Ah, okay. Interesting. Yeah. I had no idea. No idea. So it's not just like plopping seeds in dirt. It's a very different process,
It's
clearly.
a different process, and they even react differently on different types of wood. So
Yep.
generally, we use red oak sawdust, so they like hardwood, and red oak is especially good for growing these mushrooms.
Yeah. Great. How about, so you mentioned one way of prepping at least one type of mushroom. Let's talk a little bit more about some tips for the home cooks. Maybe for first of all, before we get to prepping, like before we start actually chopping in or doing whatever for the dish we might be making, what do you recommend for cleaning for before you actually get ready to? I've
So
definitely read different theories out there, so I'm curious
yeah,
as to
so I
make
mean
sure.
those white button mushrooms you buy in the store, people say to not soak them or to just brush them off. They are grown in dirt or composted animal manure, so
Mhm.
you definitely want to clean those.
Yep.
Um, my experience with the mushrooms we grow is everything is very clean because we're growing indoors. We
Yep.
wear gloves the whole time. All our harvest bins are sanitized every day. So our process is very clean. The only bit of dirt or, you know, that you wouldn't want to eat on our mushrooms might be a few crumbs of sawdust.
Yep.
And so what I recommend, especially on the shiitake, they sometimes have little flecks of sawdust. I fill a bowl of water and just do one quick dunk. Like I
Oh,
throw them
okay.
in, I rinse once, and I pull them out. So mushrooms are
Mhm.
90% water.
Yeah.
And so like one quick rinse through water isn't going to totally soak them.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
so that's how I do it, just to
And you
loosen
don't
that
lose
little
it.
bit of
Oh, I'm
sawdust.
sorry. So you don't lose any flavor doing it that way because some people have read sort of like, oh, don't do, don't get
I,
water.
I don't I don't think so. Like a quick rinse, I don't
Well,
see any negative flavor
all right.
impact.
Well, I've been meticulously taking each of your little shiitakes with my little brush. I will definitely do a test, and if yeah, I'm sure that will work, and it'll save me a good amount of prep time, which isn't a
Yeah,
bad
just
thing. I
dump
like.
that little bag in water and quick rinse.
All right, all right. I feel empowered for my next batch of mushrooms. Okay, cool.
Well,
Now,
so
go ahead.
David, the other part of that is one of your questions was about how do we prepare these. So part two of that answer is mushrooms are already 90% water.
Yep.
So if they do soak up a little water in the washing process, you put them in a pan to start cooking them, they always release water.
Right.
So they may release a little more water if you wash them, but it's not going to negatively impact your recipe.
Okay, great. Yeah, let's go into you mentioned, trying to get one type crispy. Other ideas for prepare ways you like to prepare
Yeah.
different types of
So
mushrooms?
these oyster mushrooms, which I'll just keep showing off because they're so pretty. I'll just
Yeah,
move them
please
right here
do.
in front of me. Um, so the oyster mushrooms, I find the stems can sometimes be a little tough.
Yeah.
And so my way to cook them is to chop them, put them in a pan and add some water first,
Hmm.
and they'll release even more water. And then you kind of simmer them for about 10 minutes.
Yep.
And while they simmer, they will become a little more tender, and then that water cooks off. And towards the end, once the pan's almost dry, then add your fat. So
Yep.
add some butter or add some olive oil, and then just
Hmm.
stir them for another 2 or 3 minutes and let them brown at the very end.
Yep. Oh, great.
So I find that makes a really tender oyster
Yeah.
mushroom. The
Yeah.
other advantage of cooking them that way is um, if you put mushrooms in a hot skillet with oil, you risk burning them and you have to pay
Hmm.
close attention. What I like to do is start my mushrooms with a little water. They're simmering on the stove while I'm prepping whatever else is going into the pan.
Yep.
And then once the mushrooms are ready, I might have some other veggies. I might have some spinach that I'm going to wilt in there. I'm ready to pay attention to what's in the pan and keep that stirring
Yep.
just as I finish it. So I'm less likely to burn the food if I start with the wet and then cook it off than if I try to
Okay.
start at a high temperature.
That makes sense. And you mentioned grilling them. Any,
Yes.
grilling season hopefully is not too far away here in New England, and others listeners might be already in that mode if they're
Yeah.
south.
So I like to take these oyster mushrooms because
Hmm.
they're so big. You can
Yeah.
see they're like, you know,
Yep.
big pieces there. Soak them in, marinate them in olive oil and lemon juice, and
Mm.
then put those on the grill. And if they're a little too small, if you're afraid they're going to fall through the rack, then put a piece of foil down and then
Yep.
put the mushrooms on and cook them until they're crispy around the edges. And they might stick to the foil a little bit, but you just, peel them off and
Hmm.
turn them over. Um, they are so tasty. So folks generally know that mushrooms have a lot of umami flavor.
Right.
And so then when you can add some acid and some oil, that
Mhm.
really elevates that umami flavor. And honestly, we've had these at barbecues where people are grilling chicken and then we're grilling the mushrooms, and you see people gravitate towards the mushrooms
Yeah.
because they're so tasty and it's such a novel food to see these big mushrooms cooked up
Yeah.
on the grill.
In that way, it sounds like you're probably just eating them as not
Yeah,
like in a sauce or whatever, just kind of
no,
enjoying the
right,
flavors. Yeah.
right. And the shiitake mushrooms, I especially like to either grill or I'll put them in the oven. Similar idea. I have a giant cast iron skillet, and so I'll put mushrooms in the cast iron skillet at a high
Hmm.
temperature and
Hmm.
roast them until they're crunchy. And then,
Hmm.
I'll pull them out of the oven and my family will eat them like chips,
Oh,
just
wow.
right out of the skillet. So
Oh, that
that's
sounds
one of our
good.
favorite preparations is the roasted mushroom.
Oh, that sounds good. That sounds good. Any other favorite recipes or ways to prepare them?
Um, sometimes I play around with shredding them. So like the oyster
Interesting.
mushrooms can come apart in
Yeah.
into pieces where you can do like a faux pulled pork kind of thing. You can see the
Oh,
kind of,
yeah. Cool.
you can tear them into pieces
Yeah.
and do a either crab cake recipe
Hmm.
where you're mixing that with some
Ah,
filler and
interesting.
egg and Old Bay
Yeah.
seasoning and making patties, or I'll roast it gently and like get a little bit of the heat out of or get a little moisture out of it and then add a barbecue sauce
Yeah.
and simmer it like that, and then you have this vegan barbecue
Ah,
that's delicious. And you can do
that's
that with the
interesting.
lion's mane mushroom as well. The lion's mane
Hmm.
mushroom pulls apart nicely into shredded pieces that you can use like a shredded meat in a shredded meat
Oh,
dish.
that sounds very good. That's, whether it's like say whether it's somebody vegan or people just trying to eat more plant-based, that's a another great
Yeah,
idea.
and I put mushrooms into everything, much to my
Yeah.
kids' chagrin some days. But if we're making tacos and I'm using ground beef in tacos, I chop up
Hmm.
mushrooms, and they're so healthy
Right.
that I try to put them in almost every meal because, whether I'm replacing meat or I'm, as a side in addition to meat, or, we eat vegetarian in our house some nights, um,
Hmm.
it's just a great flavorful
Yeah.
addition or replacement for meat.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. I'm similar. I mean, I do love sometimes, just making a mushroom sauce for, to have like some steak, pork, or chicken or something like that. But I also, and salmon actually too. That's a
Hmm.
good use. But same thing, like something just putting a few into a sauce or something. It's even that has that umami. So and
Right.
yeah, that's definitely good way to use them. You touched upon the health benefits. You want to elaborate on that point? I know I've generally heard that they're healthy, but I don't know if you want to give some.
Sure. So in a general sense, they're high fiber, high water, low calorie food. So they
Right.
fit well into if you're eating healthy and just trying to watch your calories. And they can be filling, as a high fiber food, they're filling. So they're healthy in that way. They also have a lot of micronutrients in them.
Mm-hmm.
Thiamine,
Yeah.
niacin, riboflavin, the shiitake have vitamin D in them. They have beta glucans, which are also in oatmeal, and they're beneficial for heart health.
Yeah.
They're prebiotics, which you've probably heard of probiotics, the healthy bacteria in the gut. The prebiotics feed the probiotics. So
Oh,
these high
interesting. Yeah,
fiber
I've heard that
foods
term. I
support
wasn't
the,
super. Yeah.
yeah, it's a food for the probiotics. So,
Okay.
yeah, they're healthy. They help you maintain a healthy gut, which can help. I think there are numerous benefits from a healthy gut in terms of heart health, mental health, um,
Yeah.
your weight, all of those things are improved with a healthy diet and a high fiber diet.
Yeah. That makes sense. Great tip. Another reason to grab some mushrooms. All right.
I know.
Cool.
That's why I said I try to put them in everything because I know
You're a
I
good
know the health
ambassador for
benefits.
mushrooms. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Kind of a side question. I just noticed as I was perusing your website that you also somehow, despite running what must be a demanding business, you look like you're pretty active in your local community. I'm kind of curious if you see that as just like a break from what you're doing day to day, or somehow do you see them intertwined in some fashion or some combination of the two?
I think they're intertwined for me from the standpoint of believing in service and community, right?
Hmm.
Like for me, my life is only as happy and rich as what I'm giving back to the people around me. And so that happens through the business where I love knowing that we're feeding people. We
Right.
also work with hunger relief organizations like the Boston area Gleaners.
Great.
They receive grant money to purchase from local farms. So,
Hmm.
I do a lot of work with them and they run the Boston Food Hub. So there's that part of outreach and, through the business. And then in my community of Westford, I have served on the select board back
Yep.
before the pandemic, and my term went through the beginning of the pandemic. So I really enjoyed being able to contribute to my community that way, to be at the table for big decisions that were
Yep.
impacting the future of our community.
Yeah.
And then more recently, I launched an organization called Flowers to Empower.
Hmm.
And this is a small local organization to teach middle and high school girls about entrepreneurship, leadership, and philanthropy.
Oh,
So
that's
these
great.
kids grow flowers. We have a cut flower business and they
Hmm.
grow and sell the flowers and then use the money to either fund outdoors adventures, like we've taken them hiking in the White Mountains in the winter and we take them camping and go to the beach. And then they also donate quite a bit of the money to the community. They've donated a few $1,000s at this
Oh,
point to the food
impressive.
pantry, to animal shelters, and a local organization that helps folks with things like rent and utilities. So it's
Wow.
really empowering to see these kids, it
Mhm.
feels good to help. And I tell
Yeah.
the kids, money can't solve all our problems in life, right?
Right.
But money can solve some problems.
Yeah.
If you don't have food, money can solve that problem. And
Right.
so to have these young women hand over a check for $1,000 to the food pantry and to know that they raise that money and that money is going to benefit some folks who might be hungry in our community, I think is really empowering and is a lesson I want these women to have early in life to see that they can make a difference um, through their leadership, through their community involvement. And
Yeah.
sometimes the biggest impact can be funneling financial resources too to help the situation.
That's great. It sounds like they're getting some great skills as well as values in the process.
And
Cool.
all volunteer work's a little selfish, right? Like
Yeah.
the kids are delightful, and I
I'm sure.
really enjoy spending time with them and seeing how they're growing and developing and learning. So it's where you can find me on Tuesday and Thursday evenings. I'm usually in the summer. I'm growing flowers with these
Oh,
young
fun.
women and hanging out with them.
That's great. Sounds like a great passion project for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. So, I guess we are kind of running toward the end of our time here, but we've tantalized people with these wonderful mushroom tales
Yes.
and recipes. So, how can people find these mushrooms? If in kind of what area it'd be probably helpful for people
Sure.
if they're
So
in this
we
area.
have these retail packs. This is our most common product, the farmer's mix where we put, 3, 4, 5, 6 kinds of mushrooms in one little box.
Yeah.
And these are available at independent retailers and farm stands, generally in the eastern Massachusetts area.
Okay. Yeah.
And through a lot of CSAs. So we work with about 20 CSAs in the area.
Oh, wow.
Farms and that offer meat or vegetables, and then they give their customers the option to add on a vegetable share. So starting in June, every week we have hundreds of shares of mushrooms going out. And the mushroom share is really my favorite part of the business because we have people that really enjoy good food. We're able to introduce them to new mushrooms and give them mushrooms of a higher quality than they've probably ever experienced at the grocery store.
Yeah.
So we have that. And then the third thing we do is these grow kits. We sell these on our website so folks can grow a couple pounds of mushrooms on their kitchen counter.
Wow.
They grow in about 10 days to 2 weeks. It's a lot of fun. You get a couple pounds of gorgeous fresh mushrooms. I think that it's a great gift for foodies. People that appreciate, especially this time of year, gardeners. You can't quite get outside and do your gardening, but you're itching to grow a little food. So it's a good lead into the spring gardening season. And it's a great weather. You can put the mushrooms outside as soon as it's above freezing and let them grow outside too. So so folks can buy them at local grocery stores, or they can order products to grow their own at home, and we can ship those anywhere in the country.
Oh, great. So folks listening outside the greater Boston area or Eastern Mass could definitely get a taste of your mushrooms that way.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay, that's great. So your website is the best place to go?
Yes, fatmoonmushrooms.com.
Okay, that's easy. And does that also indicate the locations where people can pick them up?
Yes, we do have a link. There is a page on the website with all our local retailers.
Great. And you're also very active I think I've seen you on Instagram. Is that the main place if people want to follow you on social or any other?
Yes, we do try to put a lot of content up on Instagram. I know folks are fascinated by the different mushrooms we grow and how to grow them. And of course, we're all looking for new recipe ideas, right? So whenever I make something tasty at home, I try to get a picture of it and share it as well.
Well, excellent. Well, I would encourage everyone to, check out your website, check out the website and the Instagram. It's been a pleasure learning more about Fat Moon Farm mushrooms. And,
thank you, David.
And I'm getting hungry
with you.
Yeah, you too. All right, Elizabeth. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Cook Local, Eat Local. To get the show notes with links for recipes and resources we covered today, go to cooklocaleatlocal.com to get the podcast landing page. And please be sure to subscribe to Cook Local, Eat Local wherever you get your podcasts. Make it a great day with some tasty local food on your plate.